Hi book friends! Today's episode of Biblio Happy Hour is brought to you by Biblio Finder, a new online directory for independent bookstores. Biblio Finder allows users to find bookstores worldwide based on your current or planned location. Hi book friends, welcome to Biblio Happy Hour, a podcast about bookstores and everything bookish. I'm your host, Victoria Wood. In today's show, we'll be talking to one of our friends from over on Bookstagram, Enobong Tommelleo. Enobong is a bookstagrammer, writer, and just an all-around lifelong lover of books. She's also a Book Riot contributor, and she's written 3 articles that caught our attention, and we're here to break it all down and get all the details. If you love the show and what we're doing over on Biblio Finder, and you want to help us support local independent bookstores, visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/bibliofinder. Patreon allows listeners like you to support the show as well as our online directory for independent bookstores. You'll also get perks for joining, such as access to our full podcast episodes, behind-the-scenes content, an opportunity to send in questions. You'll get discount codes, shout-outs, plus more. That's patreon.com/bibliofinder. We'll also leave a link in the show details. Before we get started with today's episode, wherever you're listening, please don't forget to share, subscribe to our podcast, and leave us a rating and review. Alrighty guys, let's talk with our guest. Enobong, thank you so much for coming on the show, and welcome to Biblio Happy Hour.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
We're so excited and so happy to have you here. But before we get started, really quick, are you a coffee or a tea person?
I'm a tea person.
Okay.
And my husband loves coffee, so I think it's really sad for him that I don't, but I'm a tea person.
Oh God, he's missing out on all the good tea. What would you say is your favourite tea?
My favourite tea is Yorkshire tea. It's from England, and it's not the strongest tea, but it's like a good middling ground.
Yeah.
So it's a good strong-ish black tea.
Okay.
And I like it with a bit of milk and a bit of sugar.
Yay, sounds good. Builder's tea, milk, sugar.
Yeah.
And proper tea. Yep, sounds good. Alrighty, so before we really get started into the interview, tell our listeners a bit about you and your reading journey. I mean, were you a lifelong reader, or was this something you picked up in adulthood?
I consider myself a lifelong reader. My parents are from Nigeria, and when they were still living in Nigeria, my mum was an English teacher there. So I think she tried to encourage reading amongst myself and my sisters,
right,
for as much as possible. But it's strange because myself and my older sister, we were both big readers, and then my immediate older sister, my younger sister, aren't big readers, but my younger sister is now an English teacher. So it's like you keep persevering and you'll eventually get to love books.
Yeah, over on your blog, I also noticed that you mentioned you're actually trying to get into the publishing industry, and right now you're in editorial and marketing. Tell us more about your journey with that, and also tell us about your writing journey, because after all, I saw 3 articles that really piqued my interest, and that's why I just had to have you on the show. So if you don't mind, share a bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I actually, when I was 18, I went to dance college, so I actually trained as a professional dancer and musical theatre performer.
Yeah.
And then I worked in musical theatre professionally for 8 years. When you enter into dance training, you're immediately told to start thinking about what's going to happen, like when you retire, because the lifetime of a dancer isn't very long.
Yep.
And it's usually longer than 8 years. Mine, I was a bit shorter than that. But yeah, I always loved books growing up. I had 2 passions, books and dancing, and dance had the shortest timeline, so I was like, let me pursue that first. But whilst I was working in musical theatre, I also did my bachelor's in English literature and language, and I took a break a couple of years ago from dancing. My body was tired, my mind was tired. It's an extroverted field, and I'm more of an introvert, so my soul was a bit tired too. So I took a break from dancing, and was lucky enough to get an editorial internship with a book review magazine called Book List in Chicago. I didn't miss the stage.
Wow.
I love watching performances, and I love watching dancing and dancing for fun, but I didn't miss the performing live. So I went back to England, and I was able to get a job as a marketing assistant with an independent press called And Other Stories.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tiny press. When I was working there were 6 of us that were full time. I don't think it's that much bigger, but they publish some really great literary books, lots of books in translation, and they really care about getting our underrepresented voices into the publishing industry. So yeah, that was a great opportunity. Now I'm seeing where I'm off to next.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But getting more specific to the articles in question, you are a Book Riot contributor. What would you say inspires the articles?
It's a wide variety of things. Like, because I also, as well as contributing to Book Riot, I also have my own personal blog, and lots of the times it'll be the same articles on both.
Right.
But I found that having like deadlines to meet with Book Riot, that I started like more actively looking and trying to find inspiration from everywhere. So lots of the things will just be like conversations I have with myself in my head, like either when I'm taking a walk or in the shower, and also like conversations that I'll have in real life with friends or on Instagram with other book lovers on there. I'll see like what's trending on there, what people are talking about on there. I also follow a lot of newsletters and publishing institutions. So like I follow Publishers Weekly. So they'll send in articles and stuff that will pique my interest, and I want to like further investigate there, or I have my own opinion about their findings.
Right, absolutely.
But I'm always looking for inspiration.
Yeah, of course. Just to bring my listeners into the conversation, I noticed 3 articles on Book Riot specifically, and yes, they're also on your page as well, that really caught our attention. And one of them is diverse fiction a new genre? Now, after reading that article, I mean, I personally felt like, you were asking this really important question, which is, are we pushing diverse stories so hard to kind of catch up with the times, that we're further marginalizing those actual voices that we're trying to bring into the mainstream? What are your thoughts on this case? Is it something you believe is happening in effect right now in 2019? And I mean, going into 2020, because we're almost there, but do you believe in effect that this is a case?
Yeah, I mean, that's scary that we're almost in 2020.
I know.
It's a tough one, because being a Nigerian British woman, I'm all for getting more diverse narratives out there, and I think it's something that we've been lacking for the longest time, that we're still lacking, and that we still need to get more into the forefront and into the mainstream. But this articles are actually inspired by a newsletter I got from Book List, where they had every now and again they'll do like a spotlight on certain genres, and they did a spotlight on diverse fiction. One of the editors mentioned it herself. She said, like, are we doing a disservice to diverse books by clumping them all together? And it's something that I've been thinking for a while, when people do like lists of diverse books. I'm like, yes, they're all written by authors from diverse backgrounds, but they're very different books. Like, you'll have fantasy with crime, with thriller, with literary, with commercial, and it kind of limits their saleability by clumping them all together. So that is a danger that we have by trying to just lift them up into one same group. Like, one thing that I do that I've noticed in Book Riot, and I admire with them, one of the reasons I wanted to be a contributor with them, is that whenever they do, like, they'll do like genre lists, like they'll do 15 best romance books or 10 great thriller novels, and they do make an effort to diversify the list. So it might be majority white male. Actually, they do try hard to not make it male, like majority male. But it might be majority white, but there will be a good number of authors from other ethnicities in the books. And I think that's something that bookshops can adopt and that other companies can adopt. That, if you're doing a big promo table for romance books to read this summer, just, be mindful and be purposeful in making sure that the display is diverse instead of having African American romances to read. There might be a time for that, and I don't think that we need to get rid of that completely.
Right.
Because as diverse authors are underrepresented, there is still space for that. But as well as that, also include them in the other big genre promotions and. Yeah.
No,
instead
you're
of pushing
right.
them all to the side.
Yes. No, that makes absolute sense. But with that also comes work, because I know, when mentioned again, I met you on Instagram, better known as Bookstagram, but when there's mention of trying to read more diverse titles, I'm not saying it comes with pushback, but it comes with a little reluctance, because it's not something seen in the mainstream. It's not reluctance that they don't want to. It's more of, oh my God, now I have to make a huge effort to do the research, find the titles, and then maybe even have to hunt them down just to purchase them. So there is that barrier as well. But also, getting back to the article, you shared some research in that post, which, by the way, I encourage everyone to look for the article and read, and I will link it in the show details. But you mentioned there was mention that there is a little possibility where if roles in publishing, jobs in publishing increase, then that will in turn increase the diversity in the novels being published. Because right now, as it is, publishing statistics and, just people working in the general publishing industry, it is majority white and it is majority female. And the percentage of diverse books being published sits at around 10%, according to Laura McGrath. But she seems to think a bit differently, though, that we can't just believe that by increasing employees from different diverse backgrounds will automatically lead to a diversity in the novels being published. What do you think on her school of thought?
So the publishing industry definitely needs to work at diversifying. Like, it's a very old, very stuck in its way industry, so it does need to be shaken up. But what I found interesting was that the majority of people, that it's majority women that work in publishing,
right?
And yet the books that win the big literary accolades and stuff are majority men, right? And it's books by men that tend to hit the New York Times sellers, like, that get the big money,
right?
So that also makes me think that maybe it's not just about who's working there, but about that slow change the culture and what we're reading. And I think I mentioned that when we think of the classics, for example, a lot of the books or the authors that we think of great classic authors will be like the Dickens and the Shakespeare and the Hardy and like lots of men, which is great. Those are great authors.
Absolutely.
But there's also a very narrow view of the authors that we're learning about in schools, in universities a bit better. Universities are diversifying their canon and their lists a bit more. But so even from like high school, from grade school, the ones that we think about as being great writers tend to all fit a box.
Yes.
And sometimes it may be a white female instead of a white male. But that's even a very narrow box, and there's not even that many white females out there that are thought of being great classic writers. So I think it also comes from diversifying those working in the publishing industry, and also diversifying what we read from a young age and what we think of as classic authors. Like we have the Chinua Achebes, we have the Buchi Emechitas, we have Ngugi wa Thiong'o, whose name I'm probably saying completely wrong. Like we have great authors